Hello everybody, it's Quirky Kirk. Been a hot minute, huh? Bet you've been wondering what I've been up to all this time. Was that? You're not? Too bad, I'm talking about it anyway. I've been working hard to build myself a server rack setup to host a private cloud gaming setup. These servers allow me to play video games from nearly every console generation while also having enough beef behind it to play some more demanding PC games. The best part is that I can play from nearly any device. You want to see how it works? Of course you do. Before we go into software and the actual interface of the gaming server itself, I'd like to take a minute to talk about the hardware in my server rack and my reasoning behind the particular selections for the gaming servers. Don't worry, we'll get to the good stuff soon, but I'd like to talk about this in the event that anyone watching this decides they want to do this themselves, which is probably a total of like 2 people, but still. Holding all of this together is a 4-post open frame server rack that I picked up from a company who was liquidating some old stock. I did not need a 48U server rack, but for $50, I couldn't ask for a better deal. Besides, it's cool, and has some room for extra expansion in the future. Looking towards the bottom of the rack is a very nice UPS that was gifted to me that plugs into a PDU. The PDU is basically a glorified power strip, and the UPS keeps the system up and running for about 10-ish minutes, give or take, during a power outage. These two devices also condition power so that in the event of a storm, things shouldn't get fried, which is great if you live in the bumfuck south. Next up in the rack is my NetApp DS4246 data shelf, which can hold a maximum of 24 data drives. Currently have 12 4TB Iron Wolf NAS drives in there, with 6 of them dedicated to game storage and another 6 for other media that we might talk about some other time. We'll get to how all that storage breaks down in a little bit, but all this data shelf really does is power the hard drives up and gives them a data connection to the server on the port in the back. Also, pro tip from Quirky Kirk, if you happen to have a device with front-loading drive bays, note the serial number on the drive and print it out on a label and put it on the front of the bays. If you're running these drives with NAS software, they're usually identified by the operating system by their serial number, so it makes identifying broken drives a little bit easier. Next up is one of the bigger attractions. This is Mist Server. This server hosts 2 virtual machines inside of it, one for hosting the storage below, and one for the aforementioned server that I might do a video on another time. The specs are listed off to the side. Now, as far as the selection process went for this, I had a lot of options. One of the easiest options, and one I might still do for my next project, is to buy retired server hardware. This is a very cost-effective way of going about things, but the main problem with doing that is noise. The server is sitting right behind my desk in my office, so I can't have something sounding like that. However, I still needed a decent amount of CPU cores, so I decided on the Threadripper 1920X. Decent amount of cores, solid clock speed, and the socket it uses means I could upgrade to the 2920X in the future if I hit the lottery. The motherboard was dependent on the CPU decision, so I went with the ASRock X399 Taichi. Primary reasons I went for this were cost, ECC support, and the large amount of PCIe slots. You'll see why that's important later. With a solid motherboard though, I recommend it even if you aren't doing a server. If you want a decent workhorse machine, this is a good one. RAM is currently 64GB of ECC memory. I definitely wanted ECC memory since it's hosting a NAS. I do plan on upping the total amount of RAM in the near-ish future since the host and FreeNAS VM are both using ZFS as the file system, and caching eats a decent chunk of that RAM. Now as far as storage, I have the data shelf of course, but inside the actual server I have 2 Samsung 250GB M2 drives holding the operating system in a mirror. There isn't a lot of writing on the OS side, so there isn't an issue with holding the OS within such small SSDs, but even so I have it mirrored so in case one dies I can just swap it out and be good to go. Similarly, I have 2 Samsung 500GB SATA drives in a mirror to hold the actual VMs. Same story here, I also have an extra SSD in there to hold my ISO files, just in case I want to rebuild or test some stuff in the future. Next comes the fun stuff, the PCIe slots. First up is some shit-ass GPU for the host operating system. I could have used literally any graphics card for this, but I needed something because the Threadripper doesn't have internal graphics, and the host can't share the 3070 since it used to be Passthrough. No biggie. Next up is the external LSI host bus adapter. This is the piece that allows us to connect to the data shelf from the server. This device is passed directly through to the free NAS virtual machine. I did a little custom modification to help it with cooling, just a little 40mm fan to help keep it cool, but it was nothing special. And finally, the most recent addition to Mist Server, a 10GB NIC for fast file read and writes. Well, faster than 1GB anyway. All of this is powered by a 650-watt power supply. It probably wouldn't hurt to upgrade this, but I just used a power supply I had laying around from a previous build. It works. And all of this beautiful hardware is housed inside of a Rosewill RSV L4000 case, sitting at a tall 4U high, same as the data shelf. Nothing particularly interesting to note about this case, it just fits everything. I did put a fan controller on here in the front to optimize cooling and fan noise, but that's about it. Now, originally, this server had a Windows 10 virtual machine with a RTX 3070 pass-through to it, and I ran all of the gaming, NAS, and other services all on the same device. It actually worked really well for what I was using it for, but a few months ago I felt like building a new PC, so I just backed up the image for the old gaming virtual machine and restored it onto this beefcake right here. This baby is Steam Server 2.0, and it only handles game rendering and streaming. I'm not going to go into the specs too much other than to say it's pretty beefy. And that 3070 is the same one that used to be in Mist Server. Don't worry, we'll get back to this bad boy because that's the whole reason you're here, but I have some more crap to show off. Moving up a little bit, we have 3 Hive Zeus servers that really aren't being used right now. I just got them at a really good deal. And also a pretty nice KVM that I also haven't set up yet because I'm lazy. Really not much there other than someday I'll actually be able to manage all the servers from the server rack in case of an emergency. So that's a nice little feature to have. Continuing on to the top part of the server rack, there is the networking equipment. This isn't too much special to note here, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. First up is a cheap Dell gigabit switch I got recently. It's connected to our main router via a 10 gigabit uplink, but I haven't even started setting this up. I did mean to, but I bought the wrong kind of serial cable, so I just kind of dropped it for a while. I also got myself a nice 10 gigabit MikroTik switch. It doesn't have too much going on with it, it's mainly to facilitate transfers between the NAS and Steam server. Maybe one day I'll have full 10 gigabit on everything, but not today. Not that it matters much at the moment, since I have just enough Ethernet ports on the Ubiquiti UDM Pro up above it. This thing handles internal networking, switching, and routing, as well as managing our wireless access point right there behind it. This thing is a really nice all-in-one networking device for a home network, and since the new firmware allows for offline setup, I can actually wholeheartedly recommend this. The wireless AP I mentioned is the Unify Wi-Fi 6 LR access point. Full disclosure, I don't think I actually needed a long-range AP, but I went nuts since this is an upstairs office and I don't exactly have permission to run cable through this apartment and build a proper network. But it works pretty well for my use case, and setup was super easy from the UDM console. Sitting on this shelf is just an RS surfboard modem, nothing special, just connects us to the outside world. Kind of an anticlimactic ending for this tour, I admit, but that's all I've got. Oh, and I do have an old Buffalo NAS sitting up here too. It doesn't do much, just wastes power and occasionally backs up some data. So there you have it, the contents of my server rack and what all that does. Now I'm done flexing so hard, let's check out Mist Server and Steam Server 2.0 for a second. So the NAS is hosted on Mist Server using the Proxmox operating system. This is a great Linux-based hypervisor system that supports virtual machines, containers, and most importantly for the original version of this project, GPU pass-through. This means that my 3070 could be passed directly to a Windows virtual machine and not used by the Proxmox host, which is what I had before when Steam Server used to be on Mist Server instead of its own dedicated device. About GPU pass-through, if you're doing this at home, you pretty much have to use an NVIDIA graphics card. There are custom kernel patches and software workarounds that you can find on Level 1 tech forums, but I personally spent several months and God knows how much money trying to get it working with no success. Well, I managed to get it to the point where the graphics card would work on every other reboot of the virtual machine, but honestly, just use NVIDIA. I'm not trying to shill for NVIDIA, but in this case, it really just works. I'm really curious to see if the Intel GPUs work with this, but now I'm rambling. Proxmox is accessed and configured with a web interface, which makes VM and containers easy to set up, delete, and rebuild. This is a really great operating system with a ton of features. Please check it out if you ever want a new project to screw around with. This video is not a tutorial for Proxmox, but I did want to show it off just a little bit just so you can understand how it works and, you know, look at it. It's pretty. Look at it. It's pretty. If you want to see a Proxmox tutorial in the future, go ahead and leave a comment and, you know, we'll see what happens actually. The NAS VM reservoir is running on true NAS scale, which is itself a Linux hypervisor platform, and that LSI card we talked about earlier is passed through to it directly from the PCIe slot. God, I love Proxmox. Anyway, the choice in operating system for the NAS was kind of a stupid one on my part. I should have used TrueNAS Core, which is much more minimal and runs on FreeBSD. The performance on Core is a little bit better, and the OS as a whole is more stable, but I did actually have a reason to use Scale. Scale allows for QEMU guest tools, which means I can actually start and stop the VM from the Proxmox web interface. Last time I tried this on Core, this was not possible. I had to go in either through SSH or go through the console and shut it down from the command line. But there isn't too much to show off here. You can see the pools I have set up, the disks I have assigned to them, as well as the share that the gaming server is using to connect to the NAS. Note I am using SMB to accomplish this, but iSCSI would be better for compatibility for certain DRM through Steam. Eventually I am going to migrate everything over to an iSCSI thing, but that's going to be a whole process and probably a video too. SMB makes it easier to manage while I'm still adding games and stuff, but iSCSI will make it so that only Steam server can touch the disks. Kind of inconvenient at the moment, but anywho, that's Reservoir, the NAS that holds all of my games and the associated metadata. Now for the part you've been waiting for, the walkthrough of the gaming server. Steam server is accessed via Moonlight, which is an open source client for the NVIDIA Gamestream protocol. This is a fantastic remote client for gaming, and I heavily recommend it. If you have an AMD card on your gaming rig and want to mess with it, don't freak out though. There's an open source implementation of the Gamestream server protocol called Sunshine, link in the description. I haven't used it personally, but I have heard good things. I had used Steam Link and Steam Remote Play for access for a long time, mainly due to native DeX support as well as the simple setup process and access over the internet. However, I had some trouble with controller support and some video render is not playing super well with it. Your mileage may vary, so if you're trying this at home, feel free to experiment. Anyway, Moonlight launches BigBox, which is the paid version of Launchbox, my primary front end and the main interface that we mess from the server from here on out. Full disclosure, I'm using the colorful dark theme if you want to try this yourself. From here, we can access our library of games from our Steam library and every ROM in our collection. BigBox interface shows us box art, a little blurb about the game, and some gameplay screenshots. The software also offers an option to download gameplay videos for this, but considering the sheer volume of games I have, I honestly don't know if I can handle that storage-wise. Also, as much as I love BigBox, the interface within each system is a little bit sluggish, so the less I can have dragging me down here, the better. But overall, I love this interface. Playing a game is as simple as selecting the system, hitting play, and when I want to stop playing, I can just exit out. Compatibility isn't a problem at all, and because it isn't running directly on my PC or anything I'm playing on, battery life is better for my client devices. For the emulators on this machine, I'm primarily using RetroArch for everything up to the 6th console generation, with standalones for everything past PSP. Using RetroArch for as much as possible made configuration more simple without sacrificing any meaningful performance. Moonlight also passes through controller inputs as generic Xbox inputs regardless of the controller, so it simplified configuration between all emulators and games even more. Not only that, Moonlight also makes resolution scaling for devices with weird aspect ratios better. Had major problems using BigBox with Steam Link for that reason, but I digress. Performance on this machine is great, which shouldn't come as a shock given the specs. I'm able to play almost every emulator at a decent frame rate, and most PC games run at high settings and are able to maintain 60 FPS. The only real issues I've had are with the 3DS emulator Citra. Any other performance issues are usually a result of poor network connection on the client side. Anyway, enough nerd talk. Let's go through some of that B-roll.
Let's get started! This battle is for you who wanted to get into a battle right away! They strike fighting poses. Vigorous attack. Oh, the attack missed. Savage attack. Himbo weak
What have I got? What have I got?
Moonlight is genuinely great, and while Gamestream only works on a local network by default, by forwarding requisite ports if you're crazy or setting up a VPN if you're smart, the server can be accessed from my cellular network or in any Wi-Fi connection. Though you might need to finagle with the resolution and frame rate on the client for connections that wide, but still, being able to play any game I could conceivably want to play from anywhere on a multitude of devices, it's pretty sweet. And to be honest, I'm tempted to start doing reviews on devices for clients to stream on. Having my own private cloud gaming server is nice. It means I can play anywhere, anytime. It also ensures that I have flexibility not only for time and location, but device as well. It also comes with the extra benefit of being able to actually back up and keep most of my software, which many cloud providers don't guarantee or even provide at all. This is an absolutely overkill setup for gaming, but this project was super fun and it's really sweet. I wouldn't necessarily recommend people go out and do this if you're in the mood for a quick project to play some games, but if you're in the mood for a long-term project, this is one that'll definitely eat up some time. Hey, thanks so much for watching my server walkthrough video. If you like what you saw here, consider leaving a like and maybe subscribe and hit that bell if you want to see some more stuff from me in the future. We've got a lot of server maintenance coming up on every server on here, so there's probably going to be a lot more of that. Also, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see tutorials for stuff like Proxmox, free NAS, or maybe even some reviews on the handhelds that I showed off here. Anyway, I'll leave you alone. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, maybe.